So we're going to start this presentation with an overview of the 6 Upangas, which are the 6 systems of Indian philosophy. And yoga, as we see, is the 5th one. They go Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Karma, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. So in this slide, we're going to give an overview of all 6 of these 6 systems of philosophy. After that, we're going to have 1 slide on yoga, then 3 slides on Karma Mimamsa, then 1 slide on Vedanta, and then we've got 1 final slide, which is the conclusion, and then we'll be done. So it's not that long a presentation. So first, we'll go through the first 3 of the Upangas. Nyaya, which means justice or ethics, or logic, validates the means of gaining knowledge. Like if you're, in terms of justice, going to a court, you want to make sure they're going to go through a logical process in order to come to whatever conclusion. And there's 4 valid means of gaining knowledge, such as direct perception, logical inference, testimony by an expert. So that's what Nyaya is about, and it's important. Vaisheshika is special qualities and perception. If I wanted to distinguish between Alana and Cassie, how do I do that? Like different colors, different shapes, or between a glass of water and a pen. You know, one is liquid, one is solid. So it's the way to distinguish between different things, which is very, important in life, so we don't, drive into a post or whatever. And Sankhya is analysis. So there's, as Dr. Nassar explained, there's different levels of creation. There's like the 5 elements. There's mind, intellect, ego, organs of action, organs of perception. So the different levels of creation. You need analysis in life. When I got my blood test, they tested my blood. They found all the components, what my sodium level is, things like that. So Sankhya is like that quality of being able to analyze and break things into components. So those are the first 3, and they're concerned primarily with knowledge and waking state of consciousness. So what's next? Yoga, the one we have been studying, is for the experience of silence and activity. So even we can think of that in terms of witnessing, that we experience silence, even activity, that state of settledness where we're not caught up in the activity of random thoughts. And that's Patanjali's Kaivalya. Next, Karma Mimansa, which we'll spend more time on today, is for locating activity or creativity within the silence. So there's a silence underlying creation, but there's some creativity that must be within that silence in order for creation to occur. Karma Mimamsa locates that, and that JK here means Jaimini's Kaivalya. So Patanjali found silence, Jaimini found, which is the seer of Karma Mimamsa, found dynamism or creativity within the silence, that's Jaimini's Kaivalya. And then Vedanta, which is the Brahma Sutras, it unified that silence and activity. And what is the relationship to the 7 states of consciousness? It's not exactly perfect, but Maharishi located, well, we know the first 3 are with waking state. Yoga is like transcending, but also cosmic consciousness, when we have silence, maintain activity. Karma Mimamsa is more refined perception within that silence, locating the dynamism. We can associate that with God consciousness, and Vedanta's unity consciousness. Silence and activity are united and everything is one. So far, we've only looked at yoga in this course. Now let's consider Karma Mimamsa. So karma is action, Mimamsa is analysis. So this is analysis of the unmanifest action or structure that underlies creation, Jaimini's Kaivalya. And I put BHS here, means black hole singularity. I'm just making the analogy to physics in that initially black holes, in terms of classical mechanics, classical physics, were thought to be like very silent deathbeds eventually of the universe, where matter went and nothing ever came out. Then later with Stephen Hawking, he found that there's actually dynamism within that silence, and that can create a whole universe with quantum fluctuations. And ZPM here means zero point motion is another way to explain that every point of creation has this infinite dynamism, and people theorize there's zero point motion machines that can tap that energy. So Jaimini's Kavalia is on that level. So we're going to look at the Karma Mimamsa, but first a one-word review of the entire Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So that's the next slide, one slide. So the first verse of the Yoga Sutras, Atta Yoga Nushasanam, or now is the teaching on yoga. So now is the one-word summary of the Yoga Sutras. Be in the now, don't get caught up in random thoughts that drag you into an illusion of the past or the future. Be in the present. Now is the only reality that exists. So that's the summary of the whole Yoga Sutras, the whole philosophy of yoga, how to do this. Catching yourself whenever you get caught in random thoughts, like as vrittis, kleshas, can be part of the process. As Maharishi devoted his entire life pretty much to explaining what generally needs also to practice a meditation technique such as TM that provides the spontaneous experience of pure being, transcendental consciousness, because yogis have spent over thousands of years have just tried to quell all their random thoughts, and they haven't really gotten anywhere. And there's all the concentration techniques, and they also haven't worked. So there was knowledge that was lost of how to transcend the spontaneously calm the mind so we can experience samadhi. So that's what Maharishi spent a lot of time talking about. All the other limbs of yoga, practices of Ayurveda are, of course, all important. Also, all areas of life need to be brought into balance. And I find the Yoga Nidra practice particularly helpful for me, as a supplement of all these other things, like including meditating, of course. So that's the one slide summary of the Yoga Sutras. Now let's consider Karma Mimamsa, analysis of the unmanifest action, dynamism, or structure within Patanjali's Kaivalya, within the silence. And this is really the most new thing that is in this presentation. So we're going to look through the first 4 verses of the Karma Mimamsa Sutras of Maharishi Jaimini, the seer of Karma Mimamsa. So the first verse of Karma Mimamsa, Atato Dharma Jigyasa, which translates as now from here, the desire to know Dharma. Karma Mimamsa Sutras start from the state of now, which is the end point of the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras get us to that experience of now where we're in the present. So once we're in that state of now, and we've got a desire to know Dharma, that's the beginning of the Karma Mimamsa Sutras. Peter Freund gave me this quote: when the Kaivalya of Patanjali, absolute pure singularity, silence, oneness of pure transcendental consciousness has been realized, then begins Karma Mimamsa, the study of the dynamism and mechanics of creation emerging from within, or within the silence, which gives rise to creation. So the second verse of the Karma Mimamsa Sutras is, Dharma is an objective characterized by injunctions. That's kind of like a very compact phrase that's been really confused. And that's why the whole, but here's a way of understanding it. Dharma is an inner transcendental tendency. So an objective is inner transcendental tendency, and injunctions or restrictions or limitations. So Dharma is just an inner transcendental tendency of an object that guides its behavior through rules and restrictions. Now I'll give an example. So here's an example. Dharma is like momentum in physics. We can think of an object is composed of particles. We have to add up the qualities of all those particles, the dharmas of all the components, and then we get the overall net karma of the object, like the motion. Like each particle can be moving in different directions. We add up all those directions, we get the macroscopic, movement, the net movement of the object. So this line over here, dharma is an objective characterized by injunctions, is just saying we add up all the individual components of motion, or all the dharmas, to determine its overall net motion, which is the karma. And there are many properties to add up, and all are subject to restrictions like conservation laws. So that's one example. The second example is from Jyotish, and it might be a little more clear. So we want to find our overall net karma in life. What's our life direction from all the planets and signs? We have to go and analyze the 10th house, the effect of Saturn, the effect of Mercury, the effect of Sun. We add up all those individual influences, individual components, each have their own restrictions, and we get the overall net karma, which is our direction in life. So that's what this is saying, as far as I understand it. Then the third verse says, examination of the means. All that means is examination and evaluation of all the dharmas, of all the different components and their interactions within transcendental consciousness, to ascertain the overall outcome or resulting action or karma that manifest on the macroscopic level. So it just means examination means add up all the components to get the net karma, add up all the little dharmas of all the little parts and get the net karma or action. All the macroscopic behaviors of an object, such as the chemical reactivity, viscosity, conductivity, etc., are determined by adding up microscopic quantum qualities, dharmas. So this is the physics example. Physics can only approximate because there's too many components to add up. And that's the same thing the Mimamsa Sutra says. This process of gaining knowledge is not through logical reasoning, but through cognition, in which the senses come in contact with or surrender to Purusha, the cosmic self. This process does not affect Dharma because it is outside of cause and effect. So because the course of karma is unfathomable, as the Gita says in chapter 4, verse 17, and outside of human capability, the individual mind needs to surrender to cosmic intelligence, the creator, to do this calculations. It's beyond the scope of the individual mind. And this is the experience of Jaimini's Kaivalya, that experience of surrendering to that universal intelligence. And thanks to Carl Herman for helping assist with the translation. So now we'll look at the rest of the Mimamsa Sutras on this one page. And this is like over 1,000 pages, and we've just compressed it down to one page of just like summarizing. So the next verse says, certainly there is eternal connection between the word and its meaning, is never erroneous in matters invisible. It is authoritative in the opinion Badarayana, which is another name for Veda Vyasa, by reason of it's not depending on others. So now, on this level of reality, there is a specific eternal connection between the name, which is the word, sound, vibration, and its meaning, form. The name, which is the seed, contains within it the form of all of its qualities. Dharma works on this level where there's a perfect correlation between name and form. Now remember, the universe ultimately is nothing but sound, frequency, and vibration. So now we're moving on to the rest of Mimamsa. In verses 6 to 11, objectors contest the validity of this means of gaining knowledge, saying, they ask a bunch of questions. How could it be beyond action if it is an act of perception? How could the word be stable if it vanishes once it's pronounced? How could it be eternal if the word make is used? How could this sound be heard simultaneously by people standing at a distance from each other? So the whole rest of the Mimamsa Sutras is a bunch of logical arguments. So in verses 12 to 23, the author begins to refute all these arguments, and then the debate continues till the end of the first chapter. So in chapter 1, the author refutes all the objections on the level of words for the case of nouns. In chapter 2, he refutes the objections concerning verbs. And now this is the whole rest of the 10 chapters. The author refutes a wide range of other objections to this procedure of gaining knowledge subjectively through the experience of Jaimini's Kavalia by surrendering one's senses to Purusha, the cosmic self. So here is the conclusion of the Karma Mimamsa. This is, by the end of the Karma Mimamsa Sutras, the procedure of gaining knowledge through cognition within Jaimini's Kavalia, the dynamism within the silence of transcendental consciousness, is established as a valid means of acquiring infallible, true, eternal knowledge. So this is like Vedic cognition. Cognizing the Veda within the silence is established as a valid means of gaining knowledge. And note, because of the perfect connection between the word and meaning on this level, a proof on the level of words constitutes a proof on the level of reality of experience. Because it's all logic, an argument, this whole book, which confuses people to try and figure out what it is that they're trying to prove. And this is basically it. The Jaimini's Kavalia is a valid means of gaining knowledge. So is that all there is to the Karma Mimamsa Sutras? It's just a sequence of logical arguments establishing that Jaimini's Kavalia is a valid means of gaining knowledge. Well, don't we want more of that than that? How do we practically establish Jaimini's Kavalia as a living reality for getting knowledge? How do we actually live that in our life? Okay, we've learned it's valid. How do we actualize it? So this next verse says, certainly there's eternal connection between the word and its meaning. Can we conclude that if after, we had this verse before, but we're just reflecting on this. Can we conclude that after establishing Patanjali's Kavalia, we read the entire Karma Mimamsa in Sanskrit, that will establish the experience of Jaimini's Kavalia in our physiology, because the words contain the experience. So if we read the words, we gain the experience. That could be true, but that's a lot of work, learning Sanskrit properly and reading this whole book. Could there be a shortcut? Certainly there have been individuals who have realized God consciousness without learning Sanskrit and reading the Karma Mimamsa Sutras. Let's consider the first verse, which we saw before. Now from here, the desire to know Dharma. So we could translate that as the Karma Mimamsa Sutras start from the state of now, the end point of the Yoga Sutras, with a desire to know Dharma. Therefore, so this is the exciting thing. If we're established in Patanjali's Kavalia, the state of now, and simply have the desire to know Dharma, the means should appear somehow to support our desire to establish Jaimini's Kavalia. A teacher should appear, or whatever else we need to realize Jaimini's Kavalia. So all we need is to have realized the state of now and have the desire to know Dharma, and somehow whatever we need will appear. This makes much more sense than thinking we can establish Jaimini's Kavalia just by reading a book. So this is the last slide on Jaimini's Kavalia. Now we've got one more slide on the Brahma Sutras. And then after that, we'll have one more slide summarizing the presentation. So the next slide's an overview of the Brahma Sutras. Can you guess the first word of the Brahma Sutras, also called the Vedanta Sutras? Hint, Maharishi said that where yoga ends, Vedanta begins, from Yoga Talk. the first word of the Brahma Sutras is atato, meaning now from here. So the whole full verse says, now from here, the desire to know Brahman. So what this means is from the state of now, the goal of the Yoga Sutras, Brahman consciousness begins to develop provided there's a desire to know Brahman. Isn't this interesting that if one has realized Patanjali's Kaivalya and has the desire to know Brahman, that's all we need, and whatever one needs, that's all the requirements, and then Brahman consciousness should develop. And I'll just make the point, people who've experienced Brahman consciousness say the same thing, we just need to have that desire, and somehow a teacher will appear, whatever else we need. Another interesting point, it seems like the Brahma Sutras and the Kami Mantra Sutras both start from the same place now, but with different desires. Patanjali's Kaivalya requires we have a desire to know Dharma. The Brahma Sutras require we have a desire to know Brahman. The Karma Mimamsa Sutras start from the state of now with a desire to know karma. So both start from the same place, and so they both develop simultaneously. And perhaps this can explain a little bit the variety in individual experiences on the path of awakening. For some people, refined perception develops first. For other people, refined perception, like God realization, doesn't develop till later on in unity, because they're both developing simultaneously, and people have different rates of development. That's my understanding. So now we've got one last slide. So we're going to return to the 6 Upangas, a summary and conclusion, and then we're done. So summary and conclusion. So here we've got the 6 Upangas over to the right again. And this is the role of yoga and nyaya, are particularly interesting. So first, yoga for realizing atta, the state of now, Patanjali's Kaivalya is the key to living. So why do I say that? Because once one realizes Patanjali's Kaivalya, the state of now, it appears any desire can be automatically fulfilled. We just have to have that desire from the state of Patanjali's Kaivalya, and the result will occur. Now, from here, the desire to know whether it's Dharma, and then produces Dharma. If we have desire to know Brahman, we'll get Brahman. If we have desire to know XYZ, we'll get XYZ. Is that true? Well, chapter 3 of the Yoga Sutras, the Vibhuti-pada, provides guidance on how, from the level of Patanjali's Kaivalya, we can fulfill specific desires, or at least life-supporting intentions. If they're not life-supporting, they won't get fulfilled. So that sums the conclusion. It's right. The Patanjali's Kaivalya is a key to living, to fulfilling desires. So then if that's the case, what is the value of the first three Upangas? Do we really need Nyaya, Vaisheshika, and Sankhya? Yes, because they provide us with the cognitive tools necessary to function in daily life. How can we function without logic, perception, or being able to analyze things? We just be like a vegetable. We need to be able to make our lunch and whatever else we need to do. Also, it seems like all 6 Upangas have their origin in Nyaya. So Nyaya has a very important significance too. And Maharishi said this, and we'll see how the next 5 Upangas originate from the valid means of getting knowledge described in Nyaya. Then that'll be the end of this slide. So the 4 valid means of getting knowledge in Nyaya are, the first one is direct perception, and that gives rise to Vaisheshika, which is perception. So out of Nyaya, the first valid means of gaining knowledge comes of Vaisheshika. Out of inference, which is Anumana, requires Sankhya, the ability to analyze. So Sankhya comes out of the second valid means of gaining knowledge. Karma Mimansa comes out of Upamana, the comparison, which is another valid means of knowledge. So for me to compare Kasi to Alana and to be able to see the difference between them, or maybe one pencil to another pencil, or one particle, another particle. We need Vaisheshika, the qualities, Sankhya analysis, and we also need refined perception to compare every single level of the two objects. And Shabda, verbal testimony by reliable experts, requires yoga because we know we need those experts to be established in the now so their minds uncluttered by vrittis and kleshas and confusion and stuff. So these first four valid means of gaining knowledge give rise to Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Karma, Mimansa, and Vedanta. And Vedanta, the last of the Upangas, arises from the exclusion, Nyaya excludes invalid knowledge, such as from delusion, dreams, and invalid logic, and that requires Vedanta, the state which is beyond illusion and delusion. So thus, as Maharishi once declared or predicted, Nyaya appears to be the origin of all the Upangas. So I've got this box. So these are two final conclusions on the values of the special roles of yoga and Nyaya. And this is the final point, just because in case people see these different names. The Kama Mimamsa Sutras can also be called the Jaimini Sutras or the Purva Mimamsa Sutras, because Purva means earlier, Mimansa means analysis, first analysis. And the Brahma Sutras are also called the Vedanta Sutras or the Uttara Mimamsa Sutras, because Uttara means higher or ladder. So it's the ladder analysis. And Vedanta means end of the Veda.